Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we are starting a brand new month, so it's time to dive right back into Todd McFarlane's ongoing epic with Spawn number 24. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in September of 1994, we see here one of the more iconic Spawn covers, not because it's necessarily completely outlandish or incredibly detailed to some degree. In fact, most of the cover is, as you can see, just blank. The reason that this cover stands out is because Todd ended up using this image more than once, most notably on the thank you issue of Spawn that he produced. But those of you who purchased the PlayStation 1 video game, Spawn the Eternal, I offer my condolences if you purchased that game, but you will remember that this image is the one that they used for the cover of that video game. So it ended up getting a lot of exposure both through the comic and through the video game medium. Story and art, Todd McFarlane. Special thanks to Greg Capullo. Copy editor and letters, Tom Orzechowski. Color, Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. The story picks up exactly where it left off in the last issue, where we see Spawn and Terry unconscious lying in the alleyway after being beaten to bloody pulps by the cyborg mafia assassin Overkill, and their bodies are being inspected by Sam and Twitch, who have been on Spawn's tail trying to figure out exactly how he connected into the Billy Kincaid murder. And they want answers from him because his involvement in that cost them some much undeserved disciplinary action. And now they finally caught up to him, only to have gotten caught in the middle of a much larger series of events that they were not prepared to be involved with. As Sam even says, "Cripes, this is going to be a lot of paperwork." And Twitch sits over their bodies trying to figure out, if they're even still alive. Also, we see Todd kind of filling out most of the background in black. Now, this does create a cool ambiance, while also giving him the luxury of not having to illustrate 2/3 of the page. We then see Twitch reach down and grab Spawn's arm, checking for a pulse, not finding one, of course, because Spawn is dead. However, they're unaware of that. Twitch decides that he needs to perform CPR and peels back Spawn's mask, which horrifies both him and Sam. Understandably, they were not expecting a completely burnt mess of a man with his face stitched back up with shoelace to be underneath that mask. They're shocked at what they find, and they're starting to question whether or not the story he told them in the last issue was in fact the reality of his background. And, Sam's still a little bit wary of this, but he was like, the only thing we've got concrete to go on is that the bag lady called him Al. It's at this point that Terry awakens and questions the name of Al, as of course that is the name of his old friend Al Simmons, who he does not realize is actually Spawn. However, before he can get his bearings, he's accosted by Sam, who states, I've got 200 questions to ask you, and I want to know exactly what the hell's going on here. And before they can get too deep into that, a random squad car on patrol happens by the scene. Sam flags them down and radios back into the precinct that they're going to need backup. They're going to need medical crews. They're going to have to, wall off this entire area so that they can do an investigation, and that he's going to need a lot more officers down here to secure this scene. Sam also states that he wants the officers to get them everything they can find on one Terrence D. Fitzgerald, as the man claiming to be that person also states he's part of the CIA, but has no identification on him to back any of this up. As he gets off the radio, the officers back at the station are happy about the fact that they found who they're looking for, as of course Sam has no idea about the shootout that happened in front of Terry's house and the 2 dead FBI agents. The officers back at the police station believe that they're going to nab the guy that killed 2 of theirs, and they also radio this into the FBI, which of course makes its way back to one Jason Wynn. He is once again doing everything in his power to secure Terry. He tells his two men that he wants Terry captured no matter what. He wants them to make sure that they get down to the scene, pull rank, get all the officers away, and if they have to take care of Terry by killing him outright, then they have full authorization to do so, because at this point, he has too much at stake. He has to find a way to pin all of his shortcomings onto Terry so that he can maintain his power in the government. And he's very much feeling the pressure of what will happen if all of this goes wrong, as he shouts at his men to just get it done. This, unfortunately, is going to bring on a lot of consequences for some other people that are basically just caught in the crossfire. But Jason, of course, doesn't care about any of this. All he cares about is preserving his power, no matter who it's going to hurt in the long run. Meanwhile, back at Terry's home, we see that Wanda is holding their child Cyan in her lap, who is asleep, as she tries to hold back tears, as she's very concerned about the safety and well-being of her husband and doesn't know what exactly is going on or what triggered any of these events. All she knows is that her husband is being accused of murder and that all of her neighbors have basically abandoned her, and there are 2 CIA agents out front of her door who claim that they're there to guard her safety, but she believes that they're also there to prevent her from leaving, and she wonders if she is in fact a prisoner in her own home. Meanwhile, back in the alleyway, we see that Terry is trying to explain all of this mess to Sam and Twitch, telling them about everything that happened with the mafia goons, and also that he doesn't understand why the giant cyborg was after him, or, why exactly Spawn has such an interest in trying to help him. Of course, Sam and Twitch are having a hard time buying any of this. Sam believes that it's just some fantasy tale that Terry's saying to get out of any legal ramifications for what's just transpired. However, Twitch is a little bit more understanding of Terry's situation, stating that, he does seem to know a lot about their procedural operations and has some access to some things that he wouldn't otherwise as just a basic civilian. Of course, Sam doesn't want to hear any of this. However, this is all being overheard by a couple of the homeless men who live in the alleyway, who are concerned about Spawn, who is their de facto leader now, and believe that he's in dire need of their help. So they run back to get some backup in the rest of the alleyways, as we see a little bit of a monologue here stating that everything that's transpired up until this point, the murder of Billy Kincaid, the weapons that were stolen from the depot, the files that have gone missing amongst the CIA and also through the mafia, none of this seems to have any real connection except for Spawn and what he was doing. Unfortunately, no one in the world is going to know how any of that's connected, because all of the information is locked in Spawn's mind and he's currently unavailable. Sam and Twitch continue to try and grill Terry, who finally loses it and states that, his wife and daughter are in serious danger. He, of course, still believing that the mafia has kidnapped his family and are going to kill them if he can't do anything to save them. This, of course, was all just a ruse, as we've seen Wanda and Cyan are perfectly safe in their home, barring, the fact that the CIA has them under strict guard and observation. And he pushes his way past Sam and runs down the alleyway. Twitch draws his gun, but of course doesn't fire on the man, as he's unarmed and he doesn't want to shoot someone in the back who's trying to escape. As we see Spawn slowly start to come back to consciousness. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, namely the office of one Tony Twist, we see Tony contemplating what his next move is, as he tells 2 of his goons that he wants them to go down to the alleyway and make sure that Overkill finish the job, and also to make sure that Overkill leaves enough of Fitzgerald's body so that he'll have a trophy to display to the rest of the mafiosos in New York City. Keep in mind, Tony is under the belief that Spawn and Terry are the same person, not realizing that they're 2 separate people. It's at this moment he gets an unexpected phone call from one of the other mafia goons, one of the other mafia leaders in New York City by the name of Gino, who states that the rest of the mafiosos in New York are starting to get a little bit anxious and are worried that Tony's not taking care of business the way that he should, and that there's going to be a meeting amongst all of the heads of the family to deal with this, and that Tony has 6 days to get all of this, put together and fixed up and tied up in a neat little bow, or else, essentially. At this point, Tony slams the phone down, pretty angry about the fact that he's now being undermined by other family heads and that his authority is being questioned throughout the crime families. After hanging up the phone, we see Tony turn to the two men in his office and tell them that he wants them to send someone over to Gino's restaurant, find his head chef, and cut both of his hands off to remind Gino of who actually runs the show in NYC. Holy crap, what a crazy hardcore way of trying to make sure that people know you're the one in charge. He then tells them that he wants a piece of Fitzgerald's head to bring to the meeting on Thursday to shut everybody up, as we see that the police, the FBI, the CIA, the mafia, and even the news media are all racing toward the alleyways to get their, hands and cameras on Fitzgerald. As, Terry's in a world of hurt right now thanks to all of the lies that have been told by Jason Wynn. And, Terry's in a terrible place as he's trying to escape both Twitch and Sam. Obviously, Sam can't run him down because, as it states in the comic, despite being a very decorated detective, he's also an overweight slob. And that's exactly why he's paired with Twitch Williams, because Twitch is the guy tasked with running people down when they try to escape, as we see Terry turn around a corner and come face to face with Twitch's revolver. As Twitch keeps him at gunpoint, Terry collapses on the ground, feeling that he's failed his wife and his daughter, and believing that at this point they're as good as dead, as Sam finally catches up, stating, "I almost had a heart attack," and Twitch says, "Good for you, sir." At this point, Sam tells Terry that if he tries to run away again, he'll shoot him himself. But before the conversation can go any farther, Sam is hit in the back of the head with an empty soda can. As he turns around to see what hit him and where it came from, he's confronted by a large contingency of the homeless men who live in the alleyways, who decide that they're going to take this opportunity to protect their de facto leader in Spawn and start pummeling the two detectives with all sorts of trash and debris. They're, of course, completely distracted by this as Terry uses the opening to once again try to escape. However, he's being cut off by a car speeding down the alleyway driven by the two CIA agents that Jason Wynn sent after him. Oddly enough, they decide that they're just going to mow him down and run him over with their car, which is strange considering that Wynn told them to bring him in alive unless he, tried to resist in some way. I find it odd that they're just like, nah, we'll kill him, that'll be easier. We see that Sam and Twitch are still just being pummeled by glass bottles and Rotten Tomatoes and all sorts of other comic book garbage, and they feel like they've got to retreat and fall back. Terry is looking down the alleyway as he realizes he has nowhere to run and sees the headlights of the car getting closer to him at a high rate of speed, believing that this is the end for him and that he's about to die. He is distracted enough to not notice the familiar-looking red cape that is coming down at him in the car from above. We're then treated to this awesome 2-page splash image where we see Spawn jump in front of the car, blocking Terry from harm's way as he tells him to get down, and the car crashing into Spawn's legs and absolutely being crushed, as we are told throughout the narration boxes that Spawn used his abilities and powers to amplify his density, making it so that the car hitting him was like crashing into a steel pillar. Of course, this is an ability that we didn't know Spawn had, but then again, Spawn's abilities are never super clearly defined, so there's a little bit of room to play there with, what he can and can't do. This, of course, just destroys the car, sending the engine block back through the dashboard into the men's legs, crushing their legs in the process. It even states that both men will never walk again, as Spawn, had been trying to conserve his powers as they are finite, and when they run out, that means, once again, he goes back to hell and is a slave to the Mabulja. But he saw that it was more important tonight to save his friend than to conserve his energy. Terry finally has the opportunity to confront Spawn face to face and just states, "Who are you?" To which Spawn replies, "A friend," as they are watched from afar by Sam and Twitch, who are stunned to see Spawn back on his feet. Obviously, they believed he was dead because of him not having a pulse or breathing. Again, them not realizing that he is in fact dead. He's just reanimated. However, it's at this point that everyone else who was racing to the scene finally shows up, as we see dozens of squad cars and, G-men showing up in black sedans and news media, all converging on their location as Sam and Twitch draw their guns on Spawn and Terry. Sam just states, "What the hell is going on here?" Spawn realizes that it's at this point he needs to make an exit, but also that he can no longer hide his existence from the world. And since he can't hide anymore, he may as well make the biggest entrance that he can, as he uses his powers to teleport away from the scene, but not before leaving a message to everyone who's in the alleyways stating these alleys belong to Spawn, as he decides to go ahead and use the name that was dawned on him by the Violator. Later that evening, realizing that it's up to him to get Terry out of this jam, Spawn decides to take matters into his own hands and basically run a blackmail scheme on everyone who's after Terry, as we see him appear in the office of none other than Jason Wynn. He tells Jason to shut up and sit down and basically just says, no matter what, I'm not going to let you deal or, go through with your plan of framing Terry. You're going to lay off from now on. And if you don't, I'm going to use these files, which he conveniently throws a copy of on the desk, to bury you and steal everything from you that you hold dear, which is most importantly, power. As he leaves the scene, Jason starts to look through the files and is shocked at what they contained, realizing that no one alive should have any access or knowledge of what these files contain. In another part of town, we see Sam in his apartment making a sandwich in the early morning hours, when suddenly Spawn appears behind him, scaring the living crap out of him, of course, and he states that he needs Sam to give some files to the chief of police, Chief Banks, and that these files contain some extracurricular activities that the media would have a field day with if they knew. He then leaves the scene of Sam's house as Sam opens up the files to look inside and is shocked at what they contain. Not completely finished with his mission yet, we see Tony Twist sitting in a sauna as suddenly Spawn appears out of the mist and says, "Hey, fat man, let's chat." He then tells Tony that he has access to all of his business dealings for months and what his plans are, and that if Tony wants to, continue with all of his operations unimpeded, that he'll leave Terry Fitzgerald alone, as he throws down another set of files for Tony to look at, and then on his way out the door says, "And by the way, stay out of my alleys as well." Later on that evening, in the home of Terry Fitzgerald and Wanda Blake, we see Wanda curled up on Terry's chest, happy that her husband is now home safely. But Terry's a little bit worried and stunned about the fact that despite being in custody and everyone who was looking for him finally having him, under their thumb and, the walls closing in, he was just let go out of nowhere. He was being questioned, and then suddenly someone walked into the room, whispered something in the ear of the man who was questioning him, and then he was let go, scot-free. Wanda says she's not really concerned about all that. She's just happy to have her husband home safe and sound, and that she was worried that she was going to lose him, that their daughter was going to grow up without a father, and that he would never see her grow up or potentially walk her down the aisle. And Terry said he was afraid for all those things too, but he's also very afraid of the fact that, when he got let go, it was because someone really high up with a lot of influence wanted him let go, and he's pretty terrified of who that person with that much influence might actually be. Outside in their yard, hanging out in the branches of the tree near their window, we see Spawn looking on, making sure that Terry got home safely. as he has to deal with the fact that the woman that he loves is in the arms of another man, his best friend specifically. We also find out at this point that the house that Terry and Wanda live in was actually Al and Wanda's house before, and that she just kept it after he died, which makes it all the more difficult for him to look on and see Terry living the life that he and Wanda were trying to build together, and, having to try and get through and deal with mentally and emotionally the fact that everything he ever wanted is just out of reach and was provided to his wife by another man entirely. But he is happy that they're safe and that he was able to protect them and that his bluff worked, meaning that, maybe not all of the information that he gave out was necessarily 100% on the up and up. And even if it was, who was he going to give that information to precisely? As we see another man in the alleyways sleeping amongst a bunch of file folders that all say top secret, and that this is the end of this story arc. On the next page, we see Image info. It's once again a lot of the same, goings on of Image Comics at that time and what the upcoming issues being released were going to be. Nothing super special to see here. It's a lot more of the same we've seen in many other issues of Image books from this time period. We then get an advertisement, two-page advertisement for that matter, of the initial run of Todd Toys, which of course we know today as McFarlane Toys. We see a few of the figures being displayed here. Obviously, the Spawn figure, the original Spawn figure with the folding cape. We also see the medieval Spawn with sword and shield. These are both action figures, as they actually have points of articulation, whereas this Violator figure surprisingly does not. It's just a static figure, so I don't know exactly how much of a quote-unquote toy you would consider it. I consider it to be more of a knick-knack personally. But then again, if you were a child of the time, I'm sure you could have found a way to play with this. I know I definitely had toys as a child with no articulation. But, it's just surprising to me that in the early 90s, Todd was willing to be like, yeah, here's a toy that just stands still in one static pose. Have fun. We then reach the spawning ground, the letter section of every issue. Surprisingly, all of the letters in this issue are overwhelmingly positive, mostly people just praising Todd, which is strange considering that Todd usually printed at least 1 to 2 letters that were somewhat negative or critical of him and his work. The one thing that does stand out in this, though, is one person wrote in asking if Todd was purposely using the names of his friends and family for characters in the book, to which he answers that yes, he does, but he also answers that he uses a lot of names of sports figures as character names. This, of course, would come back to haunt him, as he specifically states that he uses Antonio Twistelli from the Quebec Nordiques, or at least that's who he was playing for at the time of this book being published, as the reference point for Tony Twist in the comics. That's a problem because he didn't get Antonio's permission to do that, and Antonio would later find out and sue McFarlane for using his likeness without his permission. I don't believe that it ever got finalized in court. I think they basically just settled out of court and Todd paid him an undisclosed amount of money, but it would cost Todd some money. And, maybe Antonio would have been cool if Todd had just asked him if it was cool to use his name. Maybe not, but it's something that Todd should have considered beforehand, of like, hey, you can't just say you're going to base fictitious characters after real life people and not at least get their blessing for it. So, keep that in mind. Anyone who's watching this that's considering potentially writing their own story, make up unique characters. Don't use the likenesses of, other people, especially people you've never met, without their permission. We then get to 2 pages of Image fan art. One of the things I always liked about Todd was that he printed Image fan art of all of the different Image characters and books, not just of Spawn. Obviously, there's a lot of Spawn-related artwork that he features, but, we also see some stuff from Wildcats, like we see here with Spartan and Voodoo and Grifter, but also Youngblood. We see here Chapel and Die Hard. We even see Prophet featured up here, which is kind of cool. I like the fact that, Todd was willing to kind of spread the love and allow a lot of other different Image creators' works to be featured in the fan art section. We then see an advertisement for Angel Visitations, the book by Neil Gaiman. We saw this advertisement several times in the Angela miniseries. I've never seen this book out in the wild, though if I did, I'd probably buy it just to see what it was about and, flip through it. It seems like it might be interesting. And then an advertisement for Wildcats Adventures. This, of course, was the companion comic to the Wildcats animated series. I don't have all of these comics, but I have several of them, and I'll eventually be getting around to making videos of this as well, just so I can show how this story differed from the original Wildcat story and how it was toned down a little bit more for a younger audience. It is kind of cool that Jim Lee took the time to make a completely separate Wildcat story that was geared towards the Saturday morning cartoon audience that was going to be potentially watching the Wildcats animated series, and realizing that, maybe the regular Wildcats series was a little much for like 5 and 6 year olds, and that he needed something that was more accessible for a younger age group. On the final page of the book, we get an advertisement for Ash, the firefighter superhero. I have some issues of Ash. I don't remember how many, but I do have some, and I'm definitely going to make some videos on the issues I have. I've never read them. I just got them in a lot, and I have a sneaking suspicion that Ash wasn't very good, because it doesn't look like it was necessarily all that good. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised, but I don't have high hopes for what lies in the pages of Ash. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for Spawn number 19 and 20. Of course, remember, 19 and 20 did not come out after issue 18. It went straight from 18 to 21. And then these two books were going to come out after issue 25. And then you were supposed to go back and read them, and everything was supposed to make sense in the sequence of events. But at the time, this was a real big faux pas. And, Todd was having to make a lot of apologies for, releasing books out of sequence. A lot of people were understandably upset that, suddenly 2 issues didn't come out when they were supposed to. And, instead of just waiting to get those books out, suddenly they got issue 21 instead. It was a real just mess at the time. But, of course, in the future, I have the luxury of owning all of these books now, so I made the videos in the correct sequence. If you're interested in issues number 19 and 20, feel free to go back and watch my videos on issues number 19 and 20. You can find them on my Spawn playlist. And that was Spawn number 24. Overall, I think it was a really good book. I think that Todd did a pretty good job of wrapping up the story arc of Terry being quote-unquote public enemy number 1, where he had, basically every arm of the law coming after him, along with the mafia, and him being blamed for a lot of things that he didn't do. And, it was interesting to see, how Todd was going to get Terry out of this jam, because keep in mind, this whole story arc was really about Terry being, in the fire, not so much Spawn. And, Spawn realizing that the actions that he was taking were having a real negative effect on people he cared about, and that, he's got to not only watch out for himself, but watch out for Terry and Wanda and Cyan and, potentially the men in the alleyways, and that, he can't just go around doing whatever he wants without any consequences or ramifications to the people around him that he cares about. But then again, these are just my opinions. You may have thought this was a bad way to end the story, thinking that it was just kind of a cop-out with the blackmail scheme and everything. But that's okay if you do, because everybody's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.